Hey, Sachin.
Hey,
You all turns up.
well, we have a new Apollon out here, but I don't think I haven't explained to them that they need to sign the agenda. the that so, Ducky, you have to file a PR to edit a particular file in order to I guess be in the meeting later. So it's let me just put in the Zoom link maybe or
Yeah, I post the 1 second. I can post you the link.
this one.
Ah, yeah.
So just go to that link and click edit, and then just add your name to the end of the list of attendees, and then file a PR, and it should auto merge,
Good
basically.
to see you.
Hey.
Good to see you all.
Okay, Pascal will not be there today. Just for your info.
Yeah, and Jeff will be a few minutes late,
Yeah.
he mentioned.
So I've again picked a couple of issues. And then but can just wait a second. I think that's it. Let's get everything ready. Okay. Yeah. And then we have agenda.
Ducky, were you able to file that PR? It's gonna
Mm,
it
I
basically once
didn't.
it's always
Yeah.
has to look something like this. You don't have to pull down the repo. You can actually just do it in the GitHub browser.
Yeah.
But there's an example
Yeah.
PR
Okay.
there. So
Just press the edit button, and then you
Mhm.
go to the attendees and just duplicate the line as you said.
Yeah, I gotta fork the repo.
Yeah, if you
Adding.
if you if you do it in the browser, you don't have to fork. You can just say create a new branch for me, and it would
yeah,
do.
it'll auto create all that for you essentially. So there's a nice flow for editing docs, at least in GitHub. But
Yeah.
it's almost nice. But
Let me see.
Okay. While this is in flight, let's just start this. Also, hi everyone. By being here, we all agree to the GraphQL spec membership agreement, the participation guidelines, the contribution guide, the code of conduct, and we also agree that our faces are uploaded to YouTube. This episode is recorded and is uploaded to YouTube, and there may be or may not be used LLMs on that. Let's start with a quick round of introductions, and we start in the order of the attendees in our list. I'm Michael.
And hey,
Next
I'm
one.
Jeff.
That is good.
And I'm Martin from Apollo.
I'm Zachin from Apollo.
I'm Ducky from Apollo.
It's a very Apollo heavy meeting.
Yeah, the others are all at the beach, I assume. I don't know. Like it's so hot in Europe. I don't know how it's in the States.
Quite hot and humid here.
Yeah.
I have a beach trip next week that I am very much looking forward to.
Awesome. We were getting the specification in shape for the next GraphQL conf so that we have a draft people can read into. And for that, in the next couple of meetings and in the previous, we're going through issues that are open on the spec repo and decide and make basically a decision on to move forward with something or to drop it or whatever. We discussed, and that's the discussion we left open. Let me find the right one. This one. That was around introducing a semantic scalar for schema name, actually. We discussed that the override directive is the only thing that actually uses a schema name. And that override is not actually the mechanism we want to use for migration stories and stuff like that, right? So the attendees last week were in agreement to drop override. That's the case, right? Okay, because
Yep.
I also checked in with the guild and they are also okay to drop it for the first version. And then we can come with something up for version 2.
That
Okay,
makes sense to me.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that we are okay with that. So all versions. 1 second. One. Okay, then we are gonna just do that. Okay, then we had a couple of discussions on this one. And that is the simplified key version. We don't have anything in the spec with the simplified key version at the moment. The question is, do we want to tackle this or should we close it? Like, it's maybe threefold. Should we ever tackle it? Should we tackle it in a later version? Or should we completely drop it? Because this also brings in confusion, at least if we do it with a single directive. Then this directive can have fields but cannot have fields, but we cannot restrict the directive to not so that the user cannot type in field selection set here if it's on a field. So there could be confusion if it should be specified or not. Overall, the directive could be a bit more messy.
And I'm more concerned about the confusion that results from trying to define key on multiple fields, because at that point it's completely unclear whether you're defining multiple keys or a compound key.
Yeah.
And I'm also skeptical, it might seem like a nice sort of initial experience, but it breaks down pretty quickly, and then you do have to switch to a different model. And I'd much rather sort of get people used to the main key mechanism that we use as part of this spec right from the start.
Yes.
And if we do want, like, I think there's sort of, we were also conflating a few different issues with this. Like, one is sort of ease of authoring. I'm not convinced that's a major use case that we need to tackle. Another potentially interesting use case is, do we want a simplified notion of identity? Like, do we want something similar to relays node interface, some
Yeah.
kind of like stringified representation of an entity. I think that's still an interesting use case to consider. Not for V1 of this spec, but definitely something that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a direction that makes much more sense to me than trying to add some basically syntactic sugar for like a very like just a very simple case where you have a single field and a single key.
Yes, and I think it's only nice syntactic sugar when you have exactly this case.
Yeah.
And all the other cases it then breaks apart. Yeah, and also like I agree about that there might be a case for simplified keys, and that's I think what actually Stephen wanted to go after, right? A
Yeah.
simpler model in using keys, like with the node interface. Okay, so then I'm going to close this one and make a note that we don't think that the directive is okay, like that we should have a key directive like specified in here, but we still gonna explore in version 2 or whatever a simplified identity model. Yeah, okay, I'll write it up later. Okay, so next thing we have here is pass source schema, and this is a bit about the structure of the specification as we have it at the moment. And so Glenn made I think a good mention here if we should introduce a separate chapter for pass source schema. At the moment, it's kind of implicit in the algorithms of the validation as a step that a GraphQL schema should be valid and should be a valid source schema. But we could also structure it in the way, and let me just get up this back, that we have at least a section that describes what valid means. Because at the moment, the validate source schemas implies that it's possible, right?
Yeah. So what
Let's go
I
back.
think it still isn't completely clear to me what the proposal is here because we've already described the requirement, right? What's the proposal here?
Which pass the source schema and may return invalid GraphQL. I ask because from the valid source schema stage, you are usually working with already passed schemas. The alternative is, for the validate source schema stage, to take the SDL and return the passed schema, but that seems less elegant as it would be the only one of 4 validation steps that returns nothing. It's about consistency, I think. In the algorithm, like the way we describe the algorithms. In the phase, each source schema is valid. Schema reference are considered. I can post the links, just if you also want to read my second.
But we already describe in the explanatory text for invalid GraphQL sort of what kind of checks are expected to be performed here.
Any source schema fails, the check's composition does not proceed. Yeah, I think that's okay.
I don't really see anything missing here. I think it's sort of it's a
I've
it's a given that in order to validate a source schema, you first need to parse it.
yes, and I think that is the point because we don't. we don't do that, right? We just talk about the schema file as if it's there. Should be added next.
But I mean, we do mention it must be syntactically valid.
I think it's because here invalid graph. Before composition, every individual source schema must be valid as per the official GraphQL specification. Common reason the
Yeah,
schema
and
may
then-
be considered invalid.
And then we do mention syntax errors as the first item.
Okay. Okay. And he so what he I think wants or suggests is to pull this out as an initial step before the
no,
validation starts.
I don't think so, because it's only the syntax errors here, the first item, that will be
Yeah.
covered by the parsing. Like the rest of the items are still normal validation errors. So this is sort of conflating parsing and validation, but I don't really see an issue with that.
Yeah.
It's also implementation specific, I think. Like, you don't necessarily need to separate those stages completely. You probably, like, we're describing the outcome here, right? So
Yeah. I think that the why he mentioned that is maybe because this is kind of an odd one. Like the others are specifically validating that something is wrong in the context of the specification. And this one is kind of because if you look at these things, this is making sure that the schema in itself is valid.
Well, I mean,
Like-
if you go one paragraph up under like formal specification, well, no, that's too far.
Too far?
Up,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, no. I've lost track now. Can
This
you go
is
back to
the chapter.
can you go back to where you were before?
Yeah. This one.
Yeah,
Formal
This
specification.
one.
Sorry.
So we do mention both syntactically valid and semantically valid here.
Yes. Yes. The only thing I can reason about is that this is an odd validation rule because all other validation rules are kind of working on the composite schema directives. So the directives that we have that are basically our directives for the specification, and this one is ensuring that it can be parsed so that the parser basically goes through this thing, and that the schema document in itself is valid. Know what I
Yeah.
mean?
So that's why this is referring to the GraphQL specification. It's like
Yeah.
it's checking whether the subgraph schema in isolation is a valid GraphQL schema according to the spec, both syntactically and semantically. I think that's a fine. Like, I don't think we need to expand on that.
I don't. Yeah. I don't think we have to pull it out as a separate chapter. I'm just reasoning. I think that is his reason why he brought that up, because it's kind of different to the other validation rules. But I'll take it back to him and ask him if this is what he was worried about with the specification text. Okay. Just quickly pull up a couple of more. That we have here.
I think we've tackled that one.
Yeah. I'll just there were the three I prepared for today, but a couple more. So at the moment, all of them that are not labeled are the ones we have to still have a look at. posted the link. If you think there is something, back we down in a few seconds. Okay, that. Yeah, so this is something that is also so this so what Glenn points out here is that in the specification text we have always these schemas, and we have an initial schema that we point out here that we use throughout a couple of steps. It's actually the same downside that we have in the graph core specification. Just quickly go there and write this back. And I dislike it as well there, because when we go to the validation section, we have here the schema. And most rules will use this schema.
Yeah.
Right? Have just queries here. But then you have, like, for instance, little snippets. We're gonna do that, but we add this little piece to this schema that we have outside. And then there are other rules that just say, okay, for this specific case, I actually have here my own schema, so forget the schema that we even mentioned up there. So it's a bit chaotic to read. See if we find a couple of these. And we do essentially the same thing where we, in some rules, have a specific schema. I mean, it's difficult to have a single schema. Maybe we actually should do it like the core spec with extends.
Well, I don't think it does that everywhere. I think that was just because it was introducing extend there in that example.
And no, because these are executable. Yeah, in this case, we are validating that there is no, you're not allowed to have types in your query, all right? So this is not actually extending. Just looking for, maybe we cleaned that up. Everywhere using, in the meantime, the yeah, I think this one is clean. We cleaned it actually up in the core specification. Yeah, okay, so this is mainly an editorial. We can do that. That we, in our specification, have also a clear core schema. And then we only validate against, although it's a bit different in our case, right? Because we are validating actually type system members, whereas the GraphQL specification has a core schema and then writes queries against the core schema. So it's more difficult to actually do that.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to go over the examples and make sure that like they're consistent wherever possible. I don't think we can only use the schema we've introduced at the beginning. We can definitely make changes
Yeah.
to it or add to it as we see fit to illustrate different points.
Yeah.
But it would be weird if we introduced like an entirely different domain, for example, in one of the
Yeah.
sections.
Type reference is possible. The terminology here is
I think this is probably too specific to
Yeah.
go over here.
yeah.
I think there are a few issues here that refer to, so for instance,
have
there's
one?
one that says specify that a source schema must have a unique name. Another one is specify the behavior of override. I think both of those
Yes.
we can now close because we've decided to leave that out.
Yeah. This one is closed as this will be up to the implementation. And we do not define to specify this name.
Yeah, and also we don't refer to it in the spec. Like there are no features in the spec that depend on the schema name anymore.
There is because in the composition we make a mention of ordering, or we at least have implementation may interleave or reorder the specified checks. That's okay.
No, that's different.
That's okay. But there is did we make we still have to make that then, because like there is a discussion we had that for stable compositions you need to have a stable order of the schemas, so you cannot just have a different order of the schemas every time you compose, because then you could end up with different schemas. Not that they are fundamentally different, but when you pick and choose, they could have different order in some things, which would not be good for schema snapshots and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the
I do wonder if we need the notion of a schema name for that, or if we can like in some other way specify that there has to be a stable order, or maybe we just specify that like the inputs have to be ordered or something. Like we don't necessarily have to specify how they are ordered. It would be really nice if we can leave out the notion of a schema name because we don't use it anywhere else, and it's a pretty ambiguous notion.
Yes. We could simply say that the schemas have to be composed and have to be composed in a stable order, and don't even mention what the order is.
Yeah.
And leave that basically up to the implementation. I mean, we could make a side note in there that it could, for instance, be the name of the schemas and something that remains stable over several composition processes.
Yeah, I think that's the important point, that it's from run to run, there should be some stability to the order.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's do it like this. So this will be up to the implementation, and we don't not defined. Making the notes so I don't forget later. The second one that you had?
Yeah, there was one on specify the behavior of override by Camille, further down.
Yeah, I'll find it. Good.
So I think we can close that one as well then.
Yeah, yeah, this one we can close. Dropping override. for V1. So, is that unused? Okay, this one we have to look at. I think it's too specific for this
Yeah.
meeting because I have to get into the schema for this behavior for inaccessible and internal in combination.
That also sounds pretty
The
deep in.
yeah, kind of a merge order. This is I think the ordering we discussed. I
Yeah.
thought we already put it in the spec text, but at the moment we didn't have an order, and it actually came from Darius that we should have in a stable order. Okay. I'll put that as a task. We're gonna do that, but we don't describe what the order is. Don't specify order in which sponsor. Yeah. Yeah, and that is the issue with the descriptions, right? So that was the instability. And now I get back. Because if you have a field that is merged that has a description on both source schemas, and it's slightly different, then the first one is picked and the second one is dropped. And that led to in tests schema snapshot issues.
Yeah. And I think you're also right, like with your original remark, like I think field ordering might also depend on composition order.
Yeah, you're right. Because like as you take these, they are filled in because we are not ordering fields after merge, like alphabetically or so. And then you have different order.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, this is just one note that we're gonna do there. Let's do one more and then scan is inaccessible versus
I thought we resolved that.
have a look. No, I think this is a new directive.
Oh, that was a proposal. I thought this was referring to the use of inaccessible on an object
Yeah.
definition.
This we resolved because it's
Yeah.
basically we thought it's a copy directive in essence, right? Inaccessible on the type is as if all the fields are inaccessible. But this is a new this came out of a discussion on the Apollo side. But I think we can just move it to version 2, this whole discussion.
Well, I mean, I think this is suggesting to break up the functionality that we currently use inaccessible for. So breaking up the use of inaccessible on individual members and on type definitions as an alternative, which
Yeah, but as I understood, inaccessible object is semantically different as putting inaccessible on the type, or
I'm not sure
okay.
if this does something different because
Applying the directives to field does above. It hides from.
oh, so the difference here is that the suggestion is that if only one subgraph adds inaccessible, then it would be removed from the supergraph. And currently, we only do that when all fields are inaccessible, I believe.
So in order to remove the whole object, but that's actually what I meant, right? It affects just the type. So if you have it on the type, the whole type's gone.
Yeah, I'm not convinced this is something we want, but I do think in any case it's not something we'll want for V1, and we don't want to break backwards compatibility with the existing usage of inaccessible.
Yeah, and I think this also doesn't. I mean, this doesn't affect inaccessible at all, because we have inaccessible as it is today,
Yeah.
which is applied on fields even if you put it on the type. And then if you want to have a slightly different inaccessible form with different semantics, we still can add that. Like
Also, to be a bit clear, when you remove all the fields of a type via inaccessible, it actually gives you an error in composition currently. Uh, just to
Does it?
clarify. It should. The exception might be for contracts where it might do something a little different. But at least in composition today, if you put inaccessible on all fields of a type, um, it says that it won't work. And basically, you then have to mark the type inaccessible. It's a story.
Ah,
And
so
then
you still have to explicitly, because
I didn't
So,
know that.
so the
Because like
reason
yeah,
there's essentially reasoning there, which is that if you mark a type inaccessible, it also has the constraint in composition that everything that references that type also then has to be inaccessible or
yeah, and
marketable.
so
Okay.
when we discussed that, we thought if the type becomes empty, we just assume that you wanted to remove the whole type. But it's actually more explicit.
Yeah, and Intelligible is very explicit about what you remove. So like typically like an example of that is also the thing I just mentioned where if you put inaccessible on a type and something else references the type, you then have to manually mark those elements inaccessible. So you can't it doesn't auto implicitly propagate essentially. So the same behavior is true of fields where all the fields are inaccessible, it doesn't auto propagate to the type.
But because that means like if you have because the way I understood it until now, that is good. So if you have a type here and that has a field,
Yeah.
right? And we say add inaccessible here. Inaccessible. Then basically, as I understood it, is it basically removes the field here, right? So
Well,
if you have a second type that has a different field, or whatever, then we still end up with this single field, right?
well, no, no. So in this case, what happens is that if one of the subgraphs marks foo inaccessible, it assumes that in the router schema, you don't want foo to be inaccessible to be accessible at all. So regardless of what other fields are added by other subgraphs, foo will still not be visible in the router schema.
that's different from the semantics I remember we originally discussed. So maybe it has changed in the meantime.
No,
Um,
I think specifically we did that because we didn't want everyone everywhere have to agree on whether something was inaccessible. And the idea is that since it's a security feature, we specifically wanted it so that it wouldn't be easily possible to like undo someone's inaccessible. You'd have to talk to everyone about making someone accessible. if that makes sense. So like it's easy to make something inaccessible, but hard to make something not be inaccessible because it takes more work. But that's intentional because it's usually okay if something is like accidentally hidden when it needs to be, you just take the work. But if something accidentally gets showed when it shouldn't, really bad.
But
That's
but then this would be a composition error.
This would not be a composition error in this case. So like the specific
Okay.
thing with the composition error is if you have all no fields and a type, because GraphQL doesn't allow empty types, right? So like if you made all the fields inaccessible, then yeah, what you've just written would be a composition error because you'd end up with a type foo that has to now have zero types in the API schema in the router's like schema. But if you put inaccessible on foo right now, that actually wouldn't be an error because it doesn't show up in the API schema, so it wouldn't matter.
Because that is interesting feedback, because originally, I don't know if you remember, Martin, we discussed even just in the spec that we just have it on fields, and that the copy semantic could also be something implementation specific, but it actually has semantic beyond just copying it to the fields.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that because I remember the original discussion when we were working on Fed2, and my recollection was that we landed on inaccessible on a type, on a specific type definition, even as basically a shortcut to applying it to all the fields in that specific type definition block.
No, we ended up just making it a lot more explicit than that is what it is, right? So like the idea is that if people accidentally make all the fields inaccessible, it can have knock-on effects. And so we very much wanted to avoid having like weird action or distance things where like you make one thing accessible and then it propagates to a bunch of other things. So like we explicitly chose it to be as explicit as possible there. And one of those explicitness things was that if you have somehow make like the last field that was visible and accessible, you then have to know, hey, this won't work then when you try to compose, then you have to make the type inaccessible. And if you make the type inaccessible, that means that well, maybe the other thing is now to make inaccessible to reference the type. And you have to mark those as well. So the idea is that it doesn't like make all that propagation happen magically and then all of a sudden like weird random fields are gone. You have to like do it explicitly so you're aware that you are making these things now, these other like side effects happen, essentially.
Yeah.
But it actually makes sense, right? Because it could be accidental that you end up with empty types,
Yeah,
and
that's
and this makes it explicit. Okay, to remove the whole type, because you're also removing it from units and stuff like that, you actually have to state that.
yeah, that's the
But
idea.
this makes actually the issue a bit more strange. Okay, but yeah, I mean this would make the issue more explicit, right? But I like I would find in this case that we have inaccessible and inaccessible object, kind of a bit weird, the directives.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Was that Shane who proposed that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we should probably ask him for clarification.
Okay.
But this definitely seems like a topic that we need to put on the agenda again.
Yeah, I like I put that on the work group. And okay, so I flagged it. We discuss it next time. I put it up again, and then we can finish it. But I also made notes to align the current validation behavior, because at the moment we assume if we do it basically wrong, because we would remove empty types. I think I have to go over it, but I think that was the discussion we had. Awesome. I think we are okay with that. Let's see if we can get one more. Otherwise, we can close the meeting because almost that time. This one is also, but I think it's not a V1 one, because there is a key deprecation like issue that also Shane opened.
Yeah.
Like, how do we deprecate keys when it comes, or signal to other people that it's deprecated?
That seems like a V2 issue.
Yeah. It could be easily added. Deprecated, yeah. Okay. I think we're good.
All right.
Then everyone have a great day,
Yeah, you too.
and I look for more
All right.
discussable things. And then we are almost through. We have almost most of the that needs to be discussed through.
Right. Well, see you next week.
The next week.